Hi, I'm Christie Clarkson, Marketing Specialist at Power Factors. Today I'm talking with Charlie Driscoll, our Head of Information Security. We'll be talking about how Power Factors' core value, trust, starts with security. Charlie's been with Power Factors since the very beginning and oversees everything cloud operations, IT, and information security. Let's jump back in. Okay, Charlie, can you help us understand the difference between cloud-based software and software that's installed on-premise? What are some of the key things to consider from a security and compliance perspective when selecting renewable energy software?
Great question, Christy. Really, I think there's some fundamental differences between the cloud and the on-premise model when it comes to securing and compliance for software. So both have their pros, both have their cons. When it comes to the cloud side of things, operating a cloud application is much easier for the person who's buying it because they don't really have to do anything, as well as for the person who's actually supporting that application because they have full control of that cloud environment, which from a security perspective can really help when it comes to things like patching or when it comes to releasing updates for security vulnerabilities. It also gives way for a much better process for change management. You have proper CI/CD pipelines with approvals where you do security scans and you update that code in this cloud environment. So it really takes and makes security a lot easier. The other great thing about the cloud providers is you can really leverage a lot of the technologies that the major providers afford you, right? Whether it's like a key management service from AWS or security vaults. So there's a way to secure secrets properly in the cloud that you don't really have to necessarily think about if you were running that in an on-premise environment. On the downside, though, cloud applications, similar to what we talked about with developing your own applications internally, right? It's so easy to get started. It's very simple for a mistake to be made, right? You accidentally expose a database to the internet. You accidentally make a web endpoint that supports HTTP instead of just HTTPS for an encryption. So if you have a good governance model in the cloud, it shouldn't be the case. However, if you don't have that governance piece and you're looking at your cloud infrastructure on a regular basis, you might miss something there. So there's the risk if you have that cloud software, something could go wrong. If we move over to the on-premise side, though, there's also the pros and cons. One of the biggest pros on the on-premise side is this idea that you really have this air-gapped software, right? It's running on this secured network. It's not necessarily going to be touching other internet-facing things, which is mostly the case, but in reality, there's always normally a way to get from an IT network to that OT network. I referenced the Colonial Pipeline event that happened in the United States a few years ago, right? And that started with an IT network moving to the OT network. So it is possible, but again, that's one of the selling points of the on-premise software is it's a lot less people that are going to be on this network. It's not normally internet facing, so there's less threats that can potentially target your software that's running on the on-premise. The other huge benefit to on-premise, it goes back to compliance. In some cases, you just can't run something in the cloud. If you look at NERC-CIP, there are no rules that allow you to run an application that is really working with critical assets in the energy industry in the cloud. It has to be run on premise. So for that reason, first and foremost, you'd have to select an on-premise solution. So compliance also plays a huge role there. One other thing I'd say downside of on-premise is it can be really hard to do the updates. Whereas on the cloud environment, it's super easy to say, hey, I'm going to update these patches. If you have software running hundreds of different places across the world, how do you patch that software? How do you make sure that it's updated properly? It gets more and more difficult to do something like that. So that's really one of the big downsides to running that on-premise software is it's more difficult to update. Also, if you want to integrate security logs to like a centralized audit place, you have to figure out how to account for that versus if it's all in a cloud platform, that generally is pretty darn easy. So yeah, definitely both have their pros and cons. And first and foremost, it goes back to compliance. If you're non-compliant, you have to go to on-premise to start, and then you have to deal with potentially how you secure the on-premise.
Thanks so much, Charlie. Look forward to seeing you in the next video.